of scrimmage. Now, he still has one timeout. They'll save that for the field goal if they have to.
We are seeing another spectacular effort by Marino, who fires. Touchdown!
You know what the Jets were thinking? He's going to take the ball and throw it into the ground.
They stopped.
They all stopped. If you take a look at it, the offensive linemen, all they did was stand up. And Marino says to Ingram, I mean, that's the communication that they have. We saw Fryer on the two-point conversion tell Marino from the back of his hand, hey, throw the ball to me. Now, here's Ingram for his fourth touchdown. This is a beautiful play. They catch the Jets napping. They're just standing there.
They froze. It appeared that Marino was going to try and stop the clock. Instead, he connected for the fourth time with Mark Ingram. And the Dolphins have a 27-24 lead with only 22 seconds remaining.
Boy, I mean, what a way to start this for Jet fans to hear that play. I mean, for the Jets, that play is reminiscent like what the fumble is to the Browns fans. Just an awful play in Jets history, a game that the Jets were dominating at one point. We'll get to more of that later, but that's the sound clip that I wanted to play leading into this era because it kind of set them on a track that produced three of the worst years in Jet history, in 94, 95, and 96 season. So you have the Bruce Coslett era ending, which brings in the Pete Carroll era. Okay, so the 94 season didn't start out that bad, as actually the Jets dominated the defending AFC champion Buffalo Bills on the road 23-3 in the season opener, and then they came home and beat the Denver Broncos in overtime to start the season 2-0. So it wasn't that bad start for the Jets in this new Pete Carroll era. But again, Carroll was the brash new defensive coordinator. He got a lot of publicity because of how, I guess, innovative he was. And the Jet defense definitely, was creative and it was young and it did a lot of exciting things. So Carroll got a lot of publicity and he was a quirky guy and they did a lot of odd things in training camp, like go bowling instead of really have these hard practices. So he's a real player's coach, okay? And I think there was a real difference between him and Coslett. A lot of the players were excited to have him. And the Jets, they still had these veterans that they brought in, like Ronnie Lott. In 94, they actually brought in a backup quarterback for Esiason and Jack Trudeau, which Trudeau wasn't great, but he wasn't, for a backup quarterback, he was adequate. And if Esiason ever got hurt, he would have, he wound up doing a pretty good job when he filled in for the 94 season. But the 94 season started with that win, so they're 2-0, then they lose 3 straight. Well, they wind up at where they are. They're 6-5 going into Thanksgiving Day weekend against the Miami Dolphins. Now, a win over the Dolphins, who are 7-4, would vault them into a tie and would put them in first place for the first time that late in the season since 1986. Okay, now the Jets had beaten the Dolphins. They had lost to the Dolphins earlier in that season, but they held another tiebreaker advantage. There would have been some kind of advantage the Jets would have had being at 7-5 over the Dolphins if they could have won that game. So not only would they have been in a tie with them, but they would have had an advantage where if they did wind up tied, they probably would have won the division. So that was a big game for the Jets leading into that game. And again, it would have put them in first place for the first time since the 1986 season. So after opening a 24-6 lead and dominating the game for the first 40 minutes, it wasn't even close. The Dolphins had no clue what they were doing. The mood inside the stadium, because I was actually there, all right, not to pour salt on my wound, but I was actually at the stadium, and I was ready to celebrate with the rest of the other fans that were there to give away who I rooted for then. It was like a celebration attitude in the first half, and the Jets were pounding them, and it was great to see them pound the Dolphins. Jet fans always love to see them pound Marino. And that's the thing, too, about Marino, is a lot of people don't understand. They think Marino tortured the Jets, and he certainly did get the Jets a lot, but the Jets got him a lot too. He threw a lot of interceptions against the Jets. I remember Eric McMillan torturing him for 3 interceptions one game. The Jets got Marino plenty of times. Think of the 91 season, the final game where they beat them down in Miami to clinch a playoff spot. So I don't have that many bad memories of Marino, but this definitely turned out to be one. So as the Jets were winning 24-6, and everyone's kind of celebrating, we're kind of anticipating them being in first place. No way we saw this coming until the Dolphins. Listen to me, the Patriots. Until the Dolphins scored to make it 24-14. So now we're like a little bit worried because they did that pretty quickly on a Marino to Ingram strike. And then before you knew it, it was 24-21. Then we were really kind of, okay, this can't happen, can it? And then the Jets actually caused a turnover on a punt where they went 3 and out. Then they punted the ball to the Dolphins. The Dolphins fumbled. The Jets got the ball like within 30 yards. They could have kicked a field goal to at least give them a 6-point lead. But Esiason wound up throwing an interception to give the ball right back. And it was just the kind of game where you felt at that point uneasy with the Dolphins getting the ball back with a little over 2 minutes left. So as you heard in the sound clip, they wind up marching down this field, and Marino, as he completes a pass inside the 10-yard line, motions to fake that he was going to spike the ball. The Jets kind of ease up a little bit, then he hits Ingram for the go-ahead touchdown, and the Dolphins win the game 28-24. Now, what I remember after that game was Dolphin fans kind of celebrating at first, and then seeing the look on the face of Jet fans, which can only be described as the look. I mean, when you've been had the history of the Jets and put their fans through what they put them through, they get this kind of look on their face. And I think Dolphin fans saw that, and the smart ones kind of took off for the exits. They don't want any part of that. The dumb ones kind of stayed around and dared to flaunt it in their face, and then those kind of people, I don't know if they were heard from again. But that's what I really remember about the end of that game. And it was such a depressing feeling leaving that ballpark. I can only describe it similar to when I actually went to the Knicks-Bulls game when Charles Smith missed those shots. And it was like a very similar type of feeling. I remember the train ride home from Penn Station after that Knicks-Bulls game was like almost of a funeral. And this is what it was like leaving the parking lot. And if you've been to the Meadowlands before, it's bad enough that you have to sit there in the middle of traffic in Jersey, and you're like 3 hours from home if you live on the island, or I was going upstate. I was a college student at the time, so I got a ride to Briarcliff Manor, which is a good, easy 2 hours, and I'm miserable already because of the way the game ended. Now I have to sit in traffic with a bunch of other miserable, hostile Jet fans. It just was a recipe for disaster, okay? And that's kind of what would happen at the end of those games in that era. So then the Jets were 6-6. They wound up losing the rest 4 games of the season to go 6-10. And then in a moment that can only be described as moronic, after the season ends and the Jets were 6-10, they had lost 5 straight to end the season. The Jets decided to make Pete Carroll the fall guy. And okay, you make him the fall guy, but it wasn't the dumbest thing that they did or said at the press conference. As Leon Hess went to the podium in announcing his new head coach, he utters the word that he was tired of losing and wanted to win now. So, of course, if you're tired of losing and want to win now, you hire Rich Kotite, because Kotite had such great success with the Eagles teams, who were probably one of the most talented groups in the history of football. And he managed to morph them from a 12-win team into a 8-win team, and turning like 7-2 starts into 8-8 seasons. But that's okay, because Kotite is the answer. So he gets the job, amazingly enough, as the rest of us are kind of, with our ears, kind of making sure we, get out the wax that we heard the right thing that Leon has said. If he wants to win now, he's going to hire who? Okay. People are in shock. He hires Rich Kotite. Kotite comes in. Okay, so he's the new head coach of the Jets, starting with the 1995 season. Now, it was kind of a homecoming for Kotite because he was born in Brooklyn, and he was the Jets offensive coordinator from 85 to 89. Now, to be fair, he didn't really do a bad job as an offensive coordinator. The Jets' offenses back then were pretty good. I mean, they weren't the 1999 Rams, but they were good. They would average 25 points a game. Wesley Walker, Altoon, they had good players. They were a pretty good system. So it wasn't, we weren't by any means, the Jet fans weren't by any means happy with this hiring, but it's not like he was winless. He had a tiny bit of success, and because he had that connection with the Jets, I think that's why they went back to him. So while Jet fans certainly weren't happy, maybe subconsciously there was a bit of understanding as to that's why they hired him. Still doesn't make it any better, and it was still a dumb decision, but there was that, maybe we could morph that into our understanding, or the Jet fans' understanding. I got to stop talking as I'm one. Maybe that's what went into how Jet fans kind of came to rest in that situation. So Kotite comes in, and he had a pretty, I mentioned how talented the Eagles were, and he actually led them to a playoff win. They were 36-28 in his 4 years there. So it wasn't like he had no success, but again, those Philadelphia teams were stocked and they were loaded, and they were picked to go to the Super Bowl every year, but somehow he managed to screw that up. But anyway, he gets hired, and after the Jets had lost the last 5 games of the 94 season, that wasn't even the worst of it, because Kotite's Eagles, who, the Jets lost the last 5 games of the 94 season, Kotite and the Eagles lost the last 7 games of the 94 season. So this is what he came into. The Rich Kotite hiring of the Jets, he entered the Jets position having lost the final 7 games of his Eagles career. Okay? So 95 and 96, what followed in the Kotite era were the 2 worst seasons in franchise history, as the Jets won just 4 of 32 games under Kotite and finished with the NFL's worst record both seasons, including a historic low 1-15 season in 1996. At the time, it was historic. The Lions went on in 2008 or 2007, I believe, went 0-16 in 1 year. But at the time, the Jets' 1-15 season was an NFL record for most losses in a season in NFL history. Yeah, again, for a single season. So Kotite had that in his mantle, as this is what he accomplished in his time as a Jet head coach. So you add in the final 5 games of the 1994 season, and you have the Jets, after losing 28 of 32 under Kotite, they had now lost 33 of 37 games, going back to their 5-game losing streak in 1994. So you have a franchise at the end of that era that was totally in shambles. All right, the 2008 Detroit Lions went 0-16. So when you get to that point, and I think Jet fans were totally frustrated at this point, this is when you feel real change could come. So as horrible as the Kotite Carroll era was, it brought in one of the better eras in Jet history. And that was when they decided to hire Bill Parcells. So when we come back, we will get into the start of the Bill Parcells era here on Hit the Mark.